Right, you're live.
I'm live, am I? Right, okay. Right, good evening everybody. I'm going to be printing shortly. I'll just wait for a few more people to arrive before I do anything too serious. At the moment what I'm working on is getting my woodblock damp so that I can print it nicely when we've got people. So this is Sheena plywood that I've been cutting on my YouTube films. So I've cut a line block and I'm going to print that first. So what I've got here is, hello Karen, hi, welcome to the party. So I'm just getting this block ready for printing. It's new, I've had a couple of prints with it already, but with Japanese woodblock it takes a while for the woodblocks to get sort of to the right state for printing well. So what I'm trying to do is kind of get the block damp and ready to print. So this is tonight, it's going to be very much like test printing, proof printing that I'm going to do. So I'm quite excited because I haven't really printed these blocks before, and also I'm going to be using some new watercolour paints as well. So that's
Evening Cardamom.
very exciting.
Evening
Hello,
Simon.
Evening Si. Evening Cardamom. So this needs to stay damp. You can see I'm just wetting it and patting it and faffing with it at the moment. So tonight I'm going to be printing with watercolours. So I've got a nice little palette of colours here and some paint, some water. It's just watercolour paint that I've got here, and these lovely little pots. Hello, hi Rosie, hi Miri and Kevin and Diana, hello. And Glynis, hi everybody. So I have these new paint pots which I absolutely love. These are from the Clay Loft in Stroud in Gloucestershire, and they are made by a potter called Tom Knowles Jackson, and he makes them to test the glazes of for his pots. So he makes these little containers and puts glaze inside them. But I just fell in love with them, so I've just...
And tell me, Laura, do those pots contain Michael Harding paint?
Yeah, Michael Harding. I have new watercolours to try. We're joking about it because Michael Harding actually sponsors my podcast that I do with painter Peter Keegan, and Peter's enjoyed Michael Harding's oil paints for years, but he's bringing out watercolours which I can print with. So yeah, these aren't available yet, but you can register your interest on Michael Harding's website if you are interested. So he's michaelharding.co.uk, and yeah, I've got all these lovely watercolours, so that's exciting. They're really beautiful. They're very, very smooth and pigment dense. So I have my Sheena here, and hi George and Esther and Yasmin from LA and Lisa from Toronto. It's always really exciting. It always sounds so glamorous, everybody in America and Canada. I'm not sure why that sounds so glamorous compared to the UK, but it does.
But we have Linda from Sweden as well.
Linda from Sweden, even better, fantastic. So this wood
and Glynis from Yorkshire.
Yeah. Well, Yorkshire, yeah, absolutely. That is about the most glamorous you can get, actually. So this is the Sheena ply, and before I came on air, I wet it. So this is just some water in here, and I've just damped the wood down. These bottles are really handy. They're called safety wash bottles in scientific terms. So if you're looking for one of these on the internet, you can get a cheap one if you put safety wash bottle in to the search engine to look for. And as I say, this is the line block. I've got 3 blocks to print tonight, so I have this I'm glad, Jasmine, you find the UK exotic. That's lovely. So I've got this block, and this is like the line block, so it's got lots of detail cut into it. And then I have a block here, which is like all the grassy areas that I'm going to print. And I have, under a pile of stuff.
Evening, Christine.
Let me just grab it. I've got a block that's going to do all the rocky areas I want to print. So Japanese woodblock, because it's watercolour, I have to like separate out the different parts of the print and then fit them back together like a jigsaw. Otherwise things get a bit muddy. So I'm separating everything else out. So if we go back and have a look at the drawing that I'm doing. So it's basically what I'm going to print now is this little bit down at the bottom here. This bit here is with its plank and its wood grain is like still being cut. So we are going with that.
And we should say bonsoir to Frederick
bonsoir
as well.
Hi, Frederick. So here is my tracing. And you can see I've already sort of done a little test by rubbing some carbon paper over the block, which is transferred onto the tracing. Like I said in the film, that plastic tracing film is a really good idea because it's so stable, because this has been in for a lot of abuse with tracings and mapping out and then rubbing carbon and stuff, and it's still going strong, so good stuff.
Evening, Mark.
Hi, Mark. So this is Polydraw, and it's I think it's 0.5 is the thickness. Yeah, we're happy with that. Yeah,
50
plastic.
micron, I think.
50 micron, we think, is the
Maybe.
tracing paper. Before I go any further, now that my brother Mark and my sister-in-law Denise have joined us, I just want to show you something really hilarious. I was down with Mark and Denise in Gloucestershire, and Denise produced a leather baron. So if you see my printing, you'll see me printing with this, so bamboo baron for taking the impression of the print. And Denise has produced this amazing article, sort of hold it up close to the camera, and it's not actually a printing baron, it's for horses, because Denise used to have horses, and apparently it develops their muscles. I think you have to smack them with it or something. It all sounds a bit dubious to me. But it's actually a wonderful bit of kit, and I am wondering if this might work really nicely for printing wood grain, because it's got a little bit of give to it, and it might get down into the grain slightly and pick up a bit more detail. So yeah, it's a little bit weird, but I really like it, and I will try printing with it when we get to the wood grain end of it. So for treating horses' muscles, apparently. So that's really cool. I'm going to have to ask Ben to deal with questions here because my feeder's seized up. And we also have Doris in the room. Are you going to come and say hello? Yes, Doris is going to come and say hello. So we have her joining the party. So back to the wood block, and I'm just stamping it and checking it's right. So I wouldn't normally, when I'm doing a print a...
Ottoman rings, it looks like a pie. I think
pie?
she's right.
Oh, what,
it's
this?
like a steak pie.
Yeah, or a pork pie maybe, yes. Yeah, definitely like a pie. So I wouldn't normally print a line block first of all on a print, but I want to this time, because I'm experimenting, and I think, thank you, Doris, and I think that it would be a good idea to lay down a very pale impression of this line block and then print the other blocks on top and then kind of develop the print. So I'm going to go with that. So I've got a little bit of watercolour here, very dilute, and I'm just going to put a little bit on the block there. And then I'm going to add some rice to smooth. I'm just going to go and put some rice paste to smooth it on. I think there's a question there, but I'll answer that in a second. So this is the rice paste, the nori, that I'm going to use to make the paint sticky and smooth so that it sticks to the paper. Effectively, it turns the paint into a printing medium. So this rice paste, I confess, is commercial rice paste, which comes in like containers like that. But I normally cook my own. I'm going to cook some up. We've got a camping stove, so I'm going to cook some up in the films we make. Ben, do you want to give me questions and I can answer? There's some questions. Do you want to give me?
Any idea why traditional tools have an area of varnish missing? Have two that have that feature?
Area? Which tools are we talking about? Is that a brush?
I don't know. If Paul could tell us.
Yeah,
what
Paul, tell us what
sort
you're
of
talking about,
tool
and
we're
we'll
talking about.
try and answer that one.
Are
so
we talking Japanese?
Brushes that I'm using here are deer hair brushes that I bought in Japan. The ones that you can get in the UK tend to look more like that and are horsehair. So I'm just working the paint and the rice paste together on the block. Now this is going to be a very pale print, but I can print it again to make it darker if I want to. So I'm just making sure I've got paint all over the block, which probably doesn't look any different because the paint is very pale.
Yes, Karen, Laura is using a chopstick.
Yep, that's a chopstick that I'm using to apply the rice paste. And over here in a plastic folder, I think you can see it, yep, is some paper that I've prepared. This is not washi paper. I am going with cheap Fabriano Academia tonight because these are not going to be great prints. I don't want to spend the money on washi, and Academia is great for practicing with. So I'm just going to grab myself a piece of that. So it's damp, it's not soaking wet, it's just damp, and I'm going to place it into the two registration slots.
I just need to say to Paul that I'm sorry, but none of Laura's tools have a bit of varnish missing off them, so can't answer that one, I'm afraid.
So
sorry.
I'm just popping that into place, and I'm just going to let it fall onto the block. And then this is baking parchment that I'm using here, just to act as a buffer between my Baron and the paper.
And Glynis would like to know whether you've let the rice paste down with water.
Yes, I have. Quite a lot, actually, Glynis. It needs it. It's very thick when you buy the stuff out of tubes. I like it to be kind of quite droppy consistency when I'm using it. Okay, so let's have a sneaky peek at what we're getting. That's looking good. So I'm just going to take my time and make sure that I've got the whole thing printed in this very pale colour. Okay, let's have a look. So that's giving me a very pale starting point for my print here. And that's really just so that I can kind of see where I'm going while I'm printing, and then I'm going to come back in and change the colour of the lines in places where I think I need them. That's my plan anyway. So I'm going to pop that back into the damp and work. I think we'll do the rocks next. So here,
Mark has just told us that that leather tool is called a leather strapping pad.
a leather strapping pad, okay. So I like the term horse baron better, actually. I think I'm going to refer to it as a horse baron in the future. It's my new favourite tool. So now I'm just wetting this block. You can see it's blue. That's from the carbon rubbing that I took. And the carbon doesn't transfer to the print, so it doesn't matter that it's got blue carbon all over it because that's not going to come up on the print. So I'm just having a little soak there while the block gets up to speed, and move these lovely watercolours out of the way a moment. And here we go. So I've got some paint in here which I mixed earlier, and it's dried out a bit, and I'm just going to wet it again. So with these watercolours you can let them dry out and re-wet them, which is something that I do quite a lot. You know, I'll mix up a batch of colour and then if I forget to cover it with cling film, which is like what I should do, then it's fine if it dries out. You can rehydrate them because there's no rice paste in there, it's just paint, and I'll add the rice paste separately. Just have a look at that. Yeah, that's good. Right, let's mop that down. So with new blocks, it's really hard to get them to print smoothly because you kind of need to season them. It's almost like, I don't know, a frying pan or something that you make, you know, you have an omelette pan and it takes a while to work really well. Well, wood blocks are like that. It takes a while to get them up to speed. So this is probably going to be a bit lumpy and bumpy to start with, but we'll see. And I'm going to start by making it sort of this buff white colour, which is really lovely actually. It's a really nice colour. I think it's called titanium buff or something, or buff titanium, and I really like it. So let me just grab my rice. So if you haven't done this before, I would suggest aiming at about 50-50 with the rice and the paint, at least to start with, to kind of get plenty of that rice into the block if you want a smooth layer of paint. I'm going to try and get the rocks to print smooth and the landscape to print rough so that you can see the difference.
Deborah, if you're listening, can you tell us whether you mean printing brushes?
So just going to work this in. So the wood needs to be damp or soaked and then blotted off before I print. And this is very early days. I mean, I've only just cut these blocks. There's lots of, I'll probably faff around with them quite a bit more. I mean, I can see I need to really smooth off these edges. I should have done that and I haven't. So I'm hoping that this will print reasonably smooth with the amount of rice I've got on it. Okay, let's see what we get. Okay. So,
yeah, Deborah would like to know what you would recommend as a starting kit for brushes.
Right, which country are you in, Deborah? Are you in the UK or in America? Or in Canada even, because it will depend.
Or somewhere else.
Or indeed somewhere else, because it will depend on where you've got access to. Because the print brushes in the UK, it's tricky to get you can't really get the deer hair ones, you can get horsehair ones. There we go. So, just work my way over. Let's see what we've got. So hopefully you can see, it's subtle stuff now, but you can see that I'm getting that kind of wash of colour over the rock areas now. But I'm going to start building that up a little
Deborah's
bit.
in America.
You're in America. Well, you are in a really lucky position because you have the wonderful McLean's printmaker in Oregon, Portland, who do mail order, and they sell these lovely brushes. They are not cheap, but they are really nice. The horsehair ones, you can probably get these in the States quite easily as well, because you can certainly get them in the UK. And I think they're Chinese. They come from China, but they're horsehair brushes. There's nothing wrong with them. They're absolutely great, and I teach with them all the time. But they fill up with paint quicker than the deer hair ones, which means when you're printing, these can get a bit claggy and need swapping out quite a lot, whereas these deer hair ones, they don't get as claggy, which I think is a Yorkshire term, meaning that they sort of get all gunked up with paint and they don't print as well. So yeah, I would have a look in the McLean's on the McLean's website. If you go, if you guys, any of you want suppliers, then there is a supplier list on my website, and that includes Japanese suppliers, and I think McLean's is on there, and certainly UK suppliers as well. So
do you know anything about the paper, love?
The paper?
Whether it's been sized. Paul would like to know if the paper's sized.
Oh, right, the Fabriano Academia. Yeah, I think it is. I think it's. I think it has been. It's not. It's not desperately absorbent. I've never had any problem printing with it. These two big boys in the background that feature each week, they're both of them printed on Fabriano Academia, because I made those way back when I hadn't got access to big sheets of washi. So they date from then. So I'm going to start doing another layer of colour now. Let's just work on this central bit and maybe a little bit up there.
And Miri says that she tried her first woodblock prints a while ago. Some of them buckled. Is this a result of using too much nori? And how to get the printed end result to dry flat easily? Right,
okay, buckling. When you say buckled,
was the paper wet when
was the paper? Yeah, was the paper wet when you printed it? And as for drying, the way that we work is to use plywood. So we use clean plywood. I have big sheets of clean plywood, and I put the prints 1 or 2 deep in the plywood, and then I use spring clips to hold the plywood flat and force the plywood flat. I have these, let me show you, these kind of bulldog clips on steroids, if you like, and they hold the plywood. We have like dozens of them, and we clamp the plywood, and that flattens the print, which really helps. So I have just put another layer of the paint on, and I'm just going to take another print.
There's another question here about brush sizes.
Right, brush sizes.
Are there a couple of good must-have brush sizes? I suppose that rather depends on the size you print.
Depends what size you're working at, but if you're starting out, probably you're not going to be printing anything enormous, and I would suggest going for probably about this sort of size, which is, I don't know what that's, centimetres.
I'm not sure where we.
Right, so now we're getting a lot darker here.
She's in Quebec. 2.5 centimetres.
2.5 centimetres, something like that. And also get yourself some little ones. But having said that, you can also work with ordinary, if you've got ordinary bristle brushes and you trim them flat across the top, you can work with stencil brushes and with cut down shoe brushes and things. What I'm going to do is I'll do a film on YouTube about different brushes and sizes and things like that, showing you how to kind of
Jimena would like to know where the resources bit is. If you go to Laura's webpage, along the top there's resources, and then within resources, is that directly
yeah, if you go into resources link? You'll see that there's various things you can look at, including a supplier list, and it will be on there.
But so it is in resources.
It's in resources, yeah. So I'm now going to start putting what I call shadings on, which are called bokashi in Japanese, and what I want is to get a sort of bleed of colour going. So I'm just, you see, I'm putting some darker paint here now, and I'm, instead of just working that in, what I want to do is fade it out a little bit. So, right, so the English, so the paper buckling thing, yeah, you need your paper to be damp. so that when you move it from block to block it stays flat and it doesn't go wavy like that. So have a look. When I get to the printing stage, I'm going to make a film about how to damp paper so that you know how to do that, and it will hold it flat until you finish printing and then you dry it out. So you see how I put the paint around the edge here, and I've got a brush here, and I'm just going to work with half the brush in the paint and half the brush out of the paint, and I'm just going to do little circles. So the brush is flat on the wood and I'm just working it in little circles with the brush staying on the wood. And I'm just going to work with that.
Paul has two more questions. One about the academia. Is it buffered? And I don't know.
I don't know.
Sorry about that.
No, it sounds like you know a lot about paper.
The other one is, have you ever used Zircon?
Yeah, I used to use Zircon all the time. Only for lino though.
Yeah.
It's a really good doer for lino. I'm not sure how its wet strength is, because bear in mind that with this technique you've got damp paper that's in and out of the pack all the time.
Zircon I think is okay for intaglio printing, so
is it? Oh right, well it should be.
Being done.
It should be. Okay, so you can hopefully see it's starting to come to life a little bit more. I'm starting to build up the layers. Now, printing like this, it's all a bit touch and go because, as I say, new blocks, not great paper, but hopefully it's enough to give you an idea. It'll be a lot better when I'm working on washi, but I just want you to see what I'm up to at the moment. So I'm just going to put in a little bit round here to bring it to life, and I think that's probably all I need, so let's just try that. So you see how I'm using lots of layers on one block, back and forth all the time. Actually, I might just make that a little bit darker. By the time I get to editioning, I'll have a much better idea of what I want to do, and then I'll just be able to sort of settle down rather than improvising like I'm doing here at the moment. But you know, Friday nights are all about kind of anarchic printing, so that's okay. So a little bit more dark here away from that area there. So you can see with printing with the brush you can be really specific about where you put things. I'm going to give this paper a little blot to get rid of, there's a bit of excess paint on it. That wouldn't happen with washi, which is much more absorbent. This is kind of the price you pay for using this cheap paper. So I'm just going to put that out of the way. Right, what prevents the water paint and rice paint from filling the smaller cut areas? It's a lot to do with that brush that I'm using, which takes the job of the brush is to spread out the paint, but it's also to make sure it cleans out the little areas. So this is a technique it's a bit like I don't know what's good equivalent. It's like learning to skateboard or something like that. The more you do it, the better your muscle memory gets and the better judge you are of how much you need of everything. So just move that out of the way. Oh, this is a completely different print. You can see this bit, these blocks belong to another print altogether. So I'm using both sides of the material all the time. So let's go back to this one.
I'm not sure whether Glynis is talking about the little
these
ones.
These ones. When I go to art fairs, I always go along to the sort of marketplace where the suppliers are, because they usually have like a cardboard box or something where they're getting rid of cheap paintbrushes, and it's just literally to mix paint and put it on the block. So I buy them and then we chop the ends off so that they're kind of convenient to use. So that's all those are. So I have a, like you can see, little tub of assorted 3 for a £5 paintbrushes there that I use. Okay, so in traditional Japanese woodblock, printers often make their own brushes out of bamboo, little shredded up bits of bamboo.
Shumena was asking about how to increase intensity and is asking whether you would use multiple layers in order to increase intensity.
Well, there's kind of various approaches to that. What you can increase intensity through the actual pigments you use. So you will get a lot more bang for your buck from an expensive watercolour than you will from a cheap one, because the pigments will be much denser. And if you're using powder pigments and things like that, you can control the density like that. I often, if I'm using yellows, will double print or even triple print and put 3 layers of yellow on to give it more impact. That's another way of doing it. But not next week, the next live stream we have in a fortnight, I'm hoping that I'll be joined by Will Francis, who is, he works using very, very traditional methods. So I'm going to drag him along to this live stream so that we can talk about stuff like that, because he uses pigment powders, he cuts cherry wood, and he sort of works in traditional ways. So I'm hoping, this will be our first guest live stream, if you like, so that's quite exciting. So I'm hoping to make a couple of films with him for this woodblock series that I'm doing at the moment. So now the block's had a bit of time to soak.
Deborah Stratford would like to know, I have been trying to figure out how you separate colours or layers of detail. It looks like you start with the most detail and go backwards.
Well, I wouldn't normally. No, it's a really good question, Deborah. Normally what would happen if I were printing is it's not really dependent on layers of detail, because unless right, let me start again. To get that very right. So the way this woodblock works is it's like a jigsaw puzzle. So this bit is, let me show you the print. So I've just printed like the area which is going to be the rocky bit of my print, and you can see all those little gaps there. Now I'm going to print the grassy area, which is going to fill up all those little gaps. And the line block, this one, the most complicated one, would normally, if I were printing conventionally, how I would normally do it, would then be printed on the top, which would kind of make sense to everyone. But I'm worried this is going to be too dominant. I'm worried that if I leave it till last and then just plonk it on the top, it'll be too heavy. So I started off with it printed quite delicately underneath everything else. And then when I've printed everything else, that pale printing will give me a much better idea of, are there some areas that need to stay pale? How heavy should I go? So it's really, I'm doing it in reverse so that I can control it better. And that's just happens to be the case for this print. So it's with Japanese woodblock, normally it makes sense to work from kind of the palest areas to the darkest, because it keeps everything clean in the damp pack. But yeah, that's why I printed that line block first. So I'm now going to start putting a little bit of colour onto here. And again, I'm going to start pale and then build up. But I'm not going to put any rice on this block. I want it kind of textured and rough. And if I put rice on it, it will smooth things out. So it won't print anything like as well as the rocks, because it hasn't got the rice to help it. But it's going to allow me to build up texture. So I'm just going to work that across the block. Okay. So hopefully you'll see this is a different texture. So what I'm doing here is how I would work on a print. It's kind of not maybe what I'd suggest you do in my book, but it's how I would work myself. Slightly unconventional. Okay, so first layer on, and hopefully if I hold it up nice and close to the camera, you can see how that's quite a textural thing. I'm going to get Ben's, my lovely assistant, to help me. Because what I want to do is build up sort of layers of texture. Okay, thank you. Colour up here. More on there. So I would probably print many layers. Now this paper is not very sensitive. This is like, I don't know, it's like listening to music with your iPhone in the car rather than listening through proper speakers. It's kind of not giving a very, the print is nothing like as sensitive as it will be when I get onto the washi paper. For this kind of technique. So when it comes to the proper printing, I'm going to be trying out the some bamboo paper from Origami. Their bamboo select paper. And yeah, that's better. Now I'm starting to build up the colour and the texture. So I'm going to go a bit darker. So I'm going to use the Bamboo Select washi from Origami, which is like very soft, pillowy kind of paper. And I also want to try the paper that I normally use, which is their Shiramini that comes on a roll, which I really like as well. So I'll be working with those two. And now I've got a brighter colour. Let's check I've got the right colour. Oh, no, I haven't. I was going to go too dark too quickly. Let's use that. Okay.
So Matthew Walton asks, liner cut question. I'm using your registration device, and sometimes I find that the second or third layer, my marks on a sheet don't all line up with the device anymore.
Ooh.
Do you have any advice?
Right, so yeah, you're printing with dry paper.
Water-based inks? Don't know.
Right, tell us what paper you're using, and is that dry paper? And we'll try and figure out a solution. So you see how I'm just pushing the paint around at the moment, and no rice to keep building up texture. Okay. And I'm just pulling the paint around, making sure that I've got no hard edges.
Do you know what the weight of the academia is?
I think it's 200 grams, maybe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 200 grams.
And Jermaine's asking how many you would normally do in an edition with this complexity.
Right. I would probably do 20, but I wouldn't print all 20 at once. I would probably aim for about 8, because I would expect to lose some. This is not like lino cut where I might go wrong on one. Japanese woodblock has a kind of higher failure rate, so I would probably print 12 and hope I'd get 8 out of it. But as I say, once I know what I'm doing, it all becomes more simple. At the moment, I've not done these before, so I'm learning. Well, I'm showing you what I'm up to. So I might not end up printing the edition in quite these colours or in the same way. Yeah, that's nice. So it's starting now to sort of come to life a bit more, and you can see how it's becoming more like three-dimensional here. So just have a look. Where's my yellow one?
Matthew says dry paper, 140 GSM, water-based ink. Does the paper remain flat?
Yeah, if the paper stays flat and your marks, you've drawn marks carefully on it, it should be okay. The only thing I can think is that if you're putting on quite heavy layers of ink, it might buckle the paper a little bit. But really, I wouldn't recommend using layers of ink that are thick enough to have that dramatic effect on paper. That's the only thing I can think would happen. It would be the paper changing size, which is probably to do with how thick the layers are, maybe. It's kind of a bit hard to say without seeing how you work.
Deborah's curious about your colour samples.
Oh, the colour samples,
Whether
right.
you choose the colours before you start.
No, not usually. I only did it because I've got you guys watching me, and I thought you probably would not be thrilled with me messing about mixing colours forever, which is what it would do. So I had like a dry run this afternoon where I mixed up some colours so that you wouldn't be bored of me too quickly.
And there are two questions here. Kevin Mears and Julie Evans both asking whether, when printing multiple prints, whether you would print each layer of all of the prints and then move on to the next layer.
Probably what I would do is a bit of half and half. I would probably, if I was printing like this, which frankly I'm faffing a bit here to show you, I would do maybe like one, yeah, I'm on my second colour now, I'd maybe print all the first colour ones and then go back and print all the second colour ones. So I might do 2 or 3 layers on each print. I'm not that interested in every print being absolutely identical. They would be very similar, surprisingly similar if I was editioning, but they wouldn't, you know, it's not a kind of mechanical process where they're all identical. It's not like the master printers in Japan who can print 100 prints where you can't see the difference between them. This is a much more organic method. So you see how now I'm gradually building up the layers, and you see the difference between the rocks and the grassy sort of area. So now I want to change colour again. And go a little bit redder. Oh right, George wants to see a watercolour mixing video like the ones you did for the Lino series. I could do, actually, that would be quite fun to do. Especially now I've got these lovely little pots from the clay loft and I've got these lovely watercolours from Michael Harding to play with. So now I'm starting to drop in this red pigment. Hello, Doris has come back. Ow, stop it. Okay. So
Julie's asking if the speckled effect is due to not using nori or not
yes,
using enough nori.
Yes, it absolutely is. If I wanted it to print smooth, then I would use some nori, and I'll show you a smooth print as well. So after I finish faffing around with this one, I'll print one smooth so that you can see. So without the rice, it's a much harder job to work the watercolour. The rice makes the watercolour sort of slide and slip, and it's not as easy. without it, so I'm working quite hard.
Sesame effect, isn't it?
Yes, it's Gomazuri, this speckled effect. It's called, which is I think Goma is sesame in sesame seed in Japanese, and it's like they consider it to be like looking like lots of sesame seeds.
Matthew now says he's going to come to one of your classes in order to learn how to put the right amount of ink on.
Yeah, you need. Yeah, I mean, very little ink, surprisingly little ink when you're lino cut printing. It's, or at least if you do it like I do, because I sometimes go to like, 16, 20 layers with a reduction lino cut, and if you don't use thin layers of ink, you'll be in real trouble with that. There's a lino cut behind me which I think I got up to, I think it's about 18 layers. Do you want to do a bit of panning, love, and show them the lino cut with the lots of layers?
What am I doing?
You're turning the camera around so they can see the
okay. I'm showing the prints hanging up, I think.
Yeah, Ben's just going to show you the prints.
Can't do that.
Hanging up so you can see.
Not really set up for this today.
Yeah. These are not new prints. They're a print I did some time ago, but we had to get them out to photograph. So I just thought you would like to see them all hanging up.
Right, we're coming back again.
Okay.
Everybody gets a look at our setup with the silver reflector.
You can see the reflector. So that lino cut print in the background there, that's got, in the high teens of layers there. So I'm going to put some colour straight from the tube on now. So I've got a nice red here for some drama. Okay. Now I don't print everything like this. It's not it's not always this kind of multiple application, but it's.
Well, actually, Jen was asking, do you print a full test print to try out all your colours before you print your full edition?
Ah, right. I do lots of testing, but the edition is never the same colour as the tests because I'm always changing things. I mean, I'm completely unable to stick to a plan because there always seems to be like, oh, but this would be a better option. And so I do lots of testing, but then I will move on from that. So usually what happens with Japanese woodblock is that I tend to narrow down the colours when I get to the edition. So I usually start off with lots of different colours or a sort of wider variation of colours. And then by the time I get to the edition, I've narrowed it down to a more restricted palette that I think works better. So things tend to get a little bit more austere as I go into the edition. Okay.
Kevin would like to know how long it would take a Japanese master printer to print a print.
Ooh, that is a tricky question. It would depend on the complexity of the print. If you are interested in watching a master making a print, have a look at David Bull's films on the YouTube, because he runs a traditional printing workshop, and you can see he quite often films people printing in his workshop, and that gives you an idea. I mean, what I'm doing here, there we go, and you see how that bright red is suddenly starting to bring the print to life. I quite like the way it works with the grey there, but I think now I look at that, I might go back and put a little bit more dark in this bit of grey just to anchor it a bit. Yeah, it's, I've forgotten what I was saying. David Bull, yeah, really good videos of printing. So I'm distracted now by thinking about what to do next.
Gretch Donovan would like to know where to find out about your classes. Well, that would be lauraboswell.co.uk.
Yeah, all my classes are listed on there. We are, I am still teaching. I've got some coming up in September, but it is very much watch this space at the moment with the COVID thing going on. But I'm hoping that they will go ahead in September at the Courtyard Art Studio, which is a lovely venue. Always like teaching there. Okay. Basically, I think what Courtyard have decided is that if the government relax mask wearing rules so that students don't have to be fully masked up all day, then classes can go ahead. So I've got my fingers crossed that we can do that. Though I will have to remember not to touch anyone, because I quite like sort of patting people on the arm and showing them how to hold tools and things, and of course you're not allowed to do that at the moment.
Christine has just bought her first tangito.
Yay!
And is there anything she should know about sharpening it?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah. You're going to talk about it.
Christine, the thing about a hangito is that the end of it has an angled flat surface, and that's the only bit that you want in contact with your sharpening stone. So basically, if you can keep that flat on your sharpening stone, then the hangito will come out nice and sharp. And the only time you turn it over is just to take the burr off. Right.
So hopefully now you can see that texture coming up. Okay. So I'm fascinated by Moira, who's in Paris but has friends in Winslow. That is quite specific. Winslow is not
centre of the world, love.
Winslow is not the centre of the world, but we are going to have a train soon, which I'm very excited about. So I'm going to go back to my rocks now, because I think they need tickling up a bit. Now that I've printed the red, just to balance them out, so I'm just going to get those wet again. So you have to wet the block each time you want to use it if it's dried, which this one has. So I'm just going to let's have a look what I've got. Okay, so what I want to do, I think, is just put a little bit of bit more dark in places, not much, but just a little taste of that. So let me have a look in my paint pots. Normally when I mix paints, I use little white dishes that you would put soy sauce in. That's what I would normally mix up in, not in artisanal. Yeah, not in artisanal pots, but there's something quite nice about artisanal pots that I quite like.
Frank wants to know how many students you have in an ordinary class.
Right. Well, we used to do 10, but now it's more likely to be, moving forward, it's more likely to be maybe 8, because it's kind of tricky at the moment. So I would say 8 usually, with lino cut or Japanese woodblock.
Jen is impressed
With
that you can answer questions and
print
nicely at the same time.
No, not really. When I was learning to print in Japan, I had a fantastic guy teaching as a master, a print master, who sadly is dead now. He was well into his 80s when he was teaching me in 2009, and he was great. And he said, look, 2 things to remember: never talk when you're doing your printing, and never do it in front of anybody else. And it's really, really good advice, but sadly not advice that I've followed ever. But I always think of him when I'm demonstrating this. Don't do it in front of anyone else. He was very reluctant to show us printing, but he was very generous in that respect.
Glynis is asking about sharpening other tools. And what you said, Glynis, is roughly correct. You only want the angled parts to be in contact with the sharpening stones. But really, rather than try and answer this now, watch this space. We'll do a video on sharpening Japanese woodblock tools.
We will do, and also you might like to look at the lino cut videos.
Yeah, the lino one's
as well,
very
which
similar.
would be quite useful, I think. Oh God, she's brought a mouse in. That's all we need. Is the cat has brought a mouse in. We just need to rescue her. So that's Doris, who's introduced wildlife into the programme.
What's he done with it?
No, it's escaped. It's escaped out. It's all right.
Out the door?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what it is. It's all right. It's escaped. So end of the drama. That was very nearly a wildlife documentary. But right. Okay. So I'm just going to introduce a little bit more colour down here. Down there. So I quite often do this where I'm dotting back and forth, actually sort of between blocks, depending on how the printing's going. So I'll print one and then I'll need more colour on a different block, so I'll go back to that. Again, this is all testing type stuff rather than something that I would necessarily do when I'm editioning. This is sort of dealing with working out bugs and things at this stage. So now I'm going to put some rice with that to smooth it out, and hopefully you'll see that the paint will actually move much more easily on the wood. Right. So let's work that in and see what we get. So as soon as you've got that rice, it's all a lot easier to move things around. So this little brush I'm using here, this is the sort of brush that you can buy quite easily in the UK. I know Hand Printed sell them. Oh yeah, I've got some news about Hand Printed. They've got the big scoops in. Do you want to show a big scoop so that I can show people?
Like that one?
Yeah, these big scoops that everybody loves so much. Hand Printed have got them back in stock. So if you're after a nice big scoop for lino cut or Japanese woodblock, they've got some at the moment. I think they get them from Mishi Hamano in Japan, who makes that sort of thing. Okay, so let's see what we've got with that. So if it thinks that this live stream beats French television. I always thought French television is very sophisticated though, isn't it? Lots of kind of intellectual talk shows, political shows and talk shows. I always sort of associate French TV with kind of being quite highbrow and sophisticated. Except we did watch a sort of French drama. Do you remember that Cops and Robbers thing where they were all shouting abuse all the time? That was excellent. It's a sort of cop programme set in Marseille I used to watch on television. Okay, so that's just introducing a little bit more random shading, because you know rocks aren't flat, and so I'm trying to sort of bring them a bit more to life. Before I go back with the line block.
Is it more traditional to put the rice paste on the block before the paint?
Oh,
that's
you don't tend to mix the paint with the rice. A couple of reasons for that. One,
that's not what he's saying.
Right, okay. The order that you put them down. I would normally put the paint down and then the rice. I don't think it really matters much. There probably is a convention, but I would normally put the paint down and then put the rice down, but then I might go back and add more paint if I felt that I hadn't got it right.
Have you any idea what those scoops are called?
No, I don't know what they're called, I'm afraid. But I know McLean's sell them in the States.
Well, that's what Esther's asking.
Yeah,
about.
they're. I want to say Marunome, but I think I'm making that up. I did have to learn all the names of the tools when I was in Japan in 2009, and I did know them briefly, but I'm not great with it. So now you can see I've just darkened that bit, and the line block at this stage has almost vanished. It's lying here and there, and now I'm going to go back to that line block and start building that up so that it works with the rest of the print. So you see how by putting more dark onto the rocks, I'm kind of bringing them into focus to balance with the red area, the turf. That's the word I'm looking for. So, where is that gone? There we go. Oh, before I print that, I should show you, I've got a block here from the background. I'm not going to print it, but I just want to show you that I'm going to, we've made some films about how I've arrived at this background block, where I've actually used brush marks, and I've painted onto paper and then stuck the paper onto the plywood for cutting. So I'm going to show you how you do that, how you can paint on paper and then you can get it in the right place to cut out a block to look like you've got brush painting. So yeah,
apparently the tool's called an asamaru.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so you see I was completely making that name up.
Marunome, you could say.
Marunome, yes.
Well,
that's
nome
right.
is a chisel.
Yeah, I don't know, but thank goodness the people who watch this live stream are so well informed.
I think they're all sitting there googling away while we're talking.
Well, yeah, maybe you're asking a friend while I'm doing this, I don't know. But it's very helpful, thank you. Oh, the Baltic ply. Ha! Yeah, I have, and I do need to say about that on the series. I did not have a great deal of success with the Baltic ply because the piece that I've got, and I will show people, it's pretty much exactly the same as the ply that I would use in terms of the hard. It's hard to cut. It may just be I was unlucky and I got a really hard piece, but I didn't find it any easier to cut than the birch ply. And the birch ply, I can go to the timber merchant and we can buy a sheet 4 foot by
8 by 4 feet.
8 by 4 feet for
1.2 metres by 2.4 metres. 30 quid?
Yeah, for 30 quid. So I wouldn't bother buying Baltic ply. I was also a bit cheesed off because it had a Dutchman in it. It had like a little patch in it as well. So I couldn't have used both sides of it either. But I would, if you want to use birch, I would strongly suggest that a good quality birch ply from the builders would be the way to go. I think we use 6mm, isn't it?
We use 6mm. The Baltic that we bought from Jackson's was thicker than that.
Yeah.
But not much.
Yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee that it wasn't just bad luck on my part and I just got a duff piece that was very hard, but yeah, I wouldn't bother buying it as an art material, personally. Right, okay, so I now need to decide what to do about this line block, and I'm just dithering a bit here because I'm not quite sure.
I'm going to tell you need to decide reasonably quickly.
Oh, because we're running out of time.
Because, well, it's 9 o'clock now. So.
All right, okay, well, I'm just going to carry on. I'm just going to keep going, and if you guys want to hang around, that would be lovely, and if you don't, I will put photos on Instagram and stuff. So now I'm going back to it, and I'm putting a little bit more grey on. So the registration system has to work really well for this because obviously I'm going to start laying fine lines down one on top of the other. So it's important to get your registration right and also to keep your paper damp, because if the paper dries out it starts misbehaving and changing shape, it can distort. So it's important to keep the paper damp and the right level of dampness. The bigger the piece of paper, the more likely you are to have problems with distortion if it dries out at all. And this is washi paper is better.
This is for Deborah.
Oh, right, okay. It's like a sort of close-up cutting tool porn there for Deborah. Didn't think I was running that sort of channel. Okay.
Gretch wants to know if you'd ever do one-day liner cut courses. You do.
I used to do Christmas card courses. They're usually 2 days.
All right.
But I used to do one-to-ones. Do you know, I don't know at the moment, because next year's a bit of a new territory with COVID, so it's conceivable that I might go for that. Okay, yeah, so you can see I've gone back and I've got the little areas in the turf there as dark as I want. Now I'm going to work on darkening up the rock areas, so I just want to get rid of, just going to dry the wood a touch. I don't want to have too much, I want the wood slightly damp, but I don't want it soaky wet, because I want to get detail into this area. So I've got like little grey flecks as I want them, and now I want to get darker. So I'm going to go with, let's see, Payne's Grey. And I'm going to use the brush that's got the red on it, but I don't think that matters. And so you can see I'm being quite more specific. I've got my brush has already got some red on it, so it's kind of nice the way that that's changing the colour as I'm inking. So you can see this is all very random, there's nothing kind of controlled about it. And sometimes I do prints that are one-offs, and I quite like that because that allows me to be really painterly with mixing colours and things. If you look at my Applecross series in the gallery of my website, you can see that I've been quite creative with that. Okay.
I Learned Train says they ordered some file lino cut tools and they arrived with a mirror finish.
Fantastic.
Do they still need to hone them before you use them?
No, I think
would say no.
File are really good actually. I think they've probably done the hard work for you. Okay, I'm trying to be careful with this line block because it's very easy to over egg the pudding with it and be too dark.
And Paul says, how are you going to remember all the stages apart from having the vid to look back at?
I'm not. I'm being distracted by Doris, who is busy hunting moths in the background here. You might hear some thumping about. That's her hunting moths. So, okay.
And Glynis is asking, what make of watercolour do you usually use?
Oh right, okay, so a bit of a mixture. I like Holbein and I use Winsor & Newton, but I confess that these new ones, these Michael Harding ones, are really lovely because they're very pigment dense, and he is kind of a bit of a traditionalist about pigments and things, so they've got very interesting pigment mixes and stuff in them. So I probably will move over. That's more like it now, you can see. So you see how now I've got the blockers coming into play, that line block, but it's not overpowering the image. So I'm quite pleased with that. I probably will just tickle up that bit down there, but it's sort of coming to life. And I think the important thing to understand is tonight what I wanted to do was to show you proofing, to show you me testing a print. So this is, you know, it would be more straightforward if I was editioning, but this is me. I haven't really learnt these blocks yet, so I'm just kind of feeling my way with them and having a bit of fun and showing you at the same time. So this has been very much improvising. So I think I might just put a little bit of dark in here. And I like the way, I quite like the way this goes from grey to red, sort of across the line block. So I probably will keep that. And I like the subtlety of the grey lines on the grass. It works quite nicely with the texture. I think with my prints, I'm always trying to just get everything to work together in harmony and nothing. You know, when you're making a picture that consists of different blocks, it's really important that the illusion is that it's a complete harmonious image. It's not like, oh, there's a block, oh, there's a block, and they're fighting. So it's always, I'm always pushing and pulling at things to try and get them to work together.
Kevin asks whether on the courses you set a subject, which you don't.
No,
it's up to you to choose your own subject.
No. What I do is I suggest people come with ideas, sketches, photos, things like that, and then I work with people on, you know, I give sort of general advice, and then I go around one-to-one with everyone and kind of talk through their ideas and what they want to achieve and that kind of thing. So that they get to work on aspects of printmaking that they like and what they're interested in. So it could be anything really. Right, I'm not ignoring you, I'm just working out which bits need ink here. Right, that's better. That's fine.
Yasmin asks if you know anything about honey-based watercolour.
Oh,
have you ever come across that?
There's a French company that makes honey-based watercolour. I've never used it myself. I don't know anything about using it, but I do know of it. I have heard of it. Because I don't paint watercolours, I only use it for printmaking. I don't know much about watercolour beyond the printing end of it, but I certainly know that exists. I'm trying to think of the manufacturer, but I can't think what their name is now. Good, Deborah, I'm pleased that this has made your day. And hopefully it shows you how much sort of flexibility there is in the process.
Michael asks when you put the print in the damp pack, whether there's any danger of it smearing. Right,
there shouldn't be. The thing about the printing process is that once the print is properly printed, there's no loose liquid paint or anything on the surface, or there shouldn't be. With washi, it's much more effective because the paint actually goes into the paint fibres, and you can stack them one on top of the other, they don't transfer. With this Western paper, it's a little bit more temperamental, that you can get some paint on the surface and that can be a problem. But yeah, it shouldn't do. The more sort of savvy you get about printing, the less problems like that you have. And it's understanding about how much paint you need and how little paint you need, and keeping that damp pack clean. But those are things I'll chat about in films to come. Yeah, do I help with the artistic side of printmaking when I'm teaching as well as the craft side? Yeah, absolutely I do. Certainly I will help with that. I think I'm just embarking on a book about lino cut, and I was thinking about this very thing, because there are sort of specific ways of there's a kind of visual language that goes with printmaking, and it's about sort of learning ways of saying stuff that works in print. Because if you come from a drawing or painting background, you have a sort of certain way of seeing the world and saying about the world in your work, and you need to learn a slightly different language for printmaking. So yeah, I would always help with stuff like that.
How long did it take you to carve the blocks?
Oh right, probably, I'm just trying to think how long it took me. Block like this one, it would probably take me 4 or 5 hours to do, something like that, maybe less than that. Block like this one is a day's work really. And then it just depends, you know. I don't ever think about it because I get myself, I love doing it so much that I lose track of time, so I'm not a very good judge of time. Like, I'll think it's 2 in the afternoon and it will be 6 in the evening, so I don't really know. Oh Claire, thank you, you're very kind. Yeah, I do like teaching, I really enjoy it, and I really miss teaching face to face. I mean, I love having live streams. I just wish you were all in the studio. Probably run out of teacups and things, but it would be really nice to have you in the studio. Gin glasses, yeah, we could do gin glasses and teacups. But I do miss teaching face to face. I'm just going to get Ben to hold that up. I'll put it. Do you want it resting on the board or something so that you can hold it, so you can have a really close up look at it. So there you go. I think we're a bit over time, but thank you for those of you who have hung in there with this live stream. And as I say, next live stream, which is in a fortnight, I'm going to have Will with me, and we'll look at the differences between like traditional Japanese woodblock approaches and my approach and stuff like that. So that should be a fun episode.
Before we go, Glynis would like to know whether you wash your blocks off at the end of the day.
No, I wash them if I want to change the colour. So let's say I've decided now I want a green landscape, then I would wash them with a soft nail brush and some soap and get rid of the red. But otherwise I wouldn't wash them. The only exception would be if I'd been printing a lot with a block like this and it had started getting all claggy with paint and rice, in which case, yeah, I'd wash it to just sort of like clean out the grot. But actually, you don't want to wash them too much if you're not changing the colour, because it kind of takes all the rice and stuff out of the block and it doesn't, you're back to square one and you have to kind of prime it again. This one I probably will wash because I'll get rid of all these darker layers before I addition so that I can reset it to pale again. Good.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody.
Thank you everybody, and I apologise for Doris. She's been a pest all evening, but you know, hey, what can I do? She's like that. And I will see you in a couple of weeks with Will. Bye for now.